Hey, Jake Newton with CPPS, Chief of Operations for the company. And if you're familiar with us, you probably know we do a lot of instruction. Teaching individuals is a huge aspect of what we do. It's part of our core business model. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to talk about instructional techniques that you can actually use if you're teaching people within your organization, whether it be frontline folks or maybe even frontline leaders. You know, and this is something I was trained on specifically when I was still active duty Air Force. And years and years ago, we had a very specific pipeline, a training pipeline that they would progress us through to become a fully qualified instructor in our area of expertise. And I remember it was so funny because when you first get through the graduation process, you get to become part of the career field I was a part of, it was called SEER, if you're familiar with SEER specialists in the military. We would graduate and we're newly minted instructors coming straight out of the pipeline, the training process to become an instructor. And you're immediately thrown into a series of having students come through as part of their requirements before they can go fly their aircraft in the Air Force, or if they're part of special operations, it's part of their training pipeline as well. And so they would come to us and they would be responsible for going through our course. Well, as part of this, when you're new, one of the things that you are very focused on is making sure that you communicate the material that you have to communicate, the objectives that you have to meet, and the requirements within those objectives so that they hit a certain learning level and all of these different things. And when you're very new, you're very focused on that. And so the relatability to your end user can be a little bit more challenging. And so I just remember going through a lot of upgrade training throughout my time frames. And as I was able to get some more experience behind me, especially experience that was relatable to the end user that I was working with, whether it be a group of fighter pilots, whether it be special operations candidates or whoever I was working with, even sometimes other agencies would come through the course. Well, my ability to go through training and have experiences that was exactly like their day-to-day and then bring that back to them and be like, okay, when you're having to use what I'm teaching you right now, say I'm teaching them how to evade enemy capture, and be able to tell them that experience as it relates to their day-to-day being a pilot and make that connectivity of here's what you're going to be seeing, here's what you're going to be thinking, here's what you're going to be feeling going through this process. It made the instruction that much more effective. And so one of the big things that we like to do as a company when we're training with different folks is really try to relate that experience to the end user. Really try to look at the instruction that we're providing from an empathetic perspective, if you will, trying to put ourselves in their frame of reference so that it's relatable, so that they can take that information away and apply it as soon as possible. And so if you're doing this, you know, if you have personal experiences, if you have a background in a very interesting space that your end user, your learner is going to be finding interesting, use those experiences. There's so much power in using your experience and sharing those stories, but the critical aspect of it is relating that story towards how they will be using the information. And that can really help your training go to that next level. Another big thing that can really help instruction too is people love to be engaged, right? People love to be involved in the process. And if you're even like me, I like to learn with my hands. I like to learn and do at the same time. And so the more we can engage in discussion or practical application of the subject matter, all the better, because then people are learning and doing. But if, say you're providing a lecture, well, ask some of those thought-provoking questions, some of those open-ended questions that can help facilitate discussion. And then as an instructor, use those questions to steer it towards that learning outcome that you are trying to accomplish. I remember so often we would have, you know, people come through that were just way smarter than I am. If there's a career field that I've taught in the past that I was just always so fascinated at just the level of intelligence, it was fighter pilots, and having the opportunity to work with them. I would oftentimes ask them a lot of questions more than I would just be providing education, because usually just by kind of putting a couple variables in place, they'd be able to kind of draw the conclusion as part of just a discussionary or problem-solving process. So it can really amplify that learning. And then, of course, the last piece, if you're doing some of these different things, is have your end user in mind. And you can kind of see how these other things I've talked about relate to this. But the more that you can provide instruction with the application of what you're asking somebody to do in mind and thinking about it from that perspective, it's going to make your whole instructional time frame or your whole outcome going to be all the more elevated. Your learning outcome will be much higher because people are going to be getting this material from a perspective of, this is me going through this process. You can communicate all of the most amazing information in the world, but if it's focused on your experience, or if it's focused on the information at hand rather than applying that information to how they're going to be using it, doing that will allow it to be much more effective. And so just a few things there, when you're going through this process and teaching others, a couple different tips that you can use to help amplify your experience and help adapt it to your learner a little bit more. So hopefully you found that interesting. We love to teach people at CPPS, and especially if you're part of our Workplace Violence Instructor certification, these are the things that we want to help you with as well. When you're doing awareness training for your violence prevention program, or you're teaching frontline leaders on enhanced concepts for violence prevention, whatever the topic du jour might be, let us know. We'd love to help you out in your instructional endeavors and talk through these things with you. So thanks for watching. CPPS.com. Sign up for our newsletter. Of course, go to our YouTube channel and all the things. But until the next time, cheers.